Alright, so we saw the difference between the Bechinas Rotzei mitzad Riyah de Chochma and the Bechinas Shoy, which is mitzad Riyah de Chochma. And we saw the difference was between whether it's purely in Moyach HaChochma, in the union of Moichin, the Riyah remains mitzad the Avedis HaMoyach, or whether we saw that it's Nimshach, the Riyah de Chochma is Nimshach or Murgash Balev. And when we saw it comes to B'teich Halev, then the Ika Aveda is Bechinas Shoy Davka. And we saw that is mitzad the Bittul of Kabbalah Soil. We wanted to say that the union of Kabbalah Soil was Davki Balev. And we brought the Moshel, the difference between the Sar and the Sar, who's Kodev El HaMelech, but that's mitzad his appreciation and his asoga in the greatness of the Melech. The Hirod Inyan HaEved, as he's be'ikah mitzad the Inyan HaLev, and therefore by him is the Riyas Pnei HaMelech and the Riyas Gadlus HaMelech. Well, that causes in him even from Bittul what is near to Achura Be'ira Gedela. And we saw that the beer was that the Sar Ikra is Bechinas Moichin, the Kol Inyone Ushu Miyoyat HaMelech, and therefore he's Mekabel the Yeke Gedulas HaMelech B'Moichay, and the Tainug and the tremendous fulfillment that he feels in the observation of the godless of the Melech is a tainug which mitzad the inyan hamoyak davke, mitzad the inyan hachochma, and therefore he's nidbak in the greatness of the Melech. But we saw that the Eved, as he's in his Kabbalah Soil, does be ikar mitzad the inyan of the Lev, and therefore he reacts and he's mekabel the godless of Melech in a way that it's poil in him shiflos. On the contrary, he becomes completely botel and efes be'ene atzmei becomes completely negated in his own eyes, and therefore he's in a state of absolute retreat from the godless Melech, being unable almost to stand in a inyan from Kiro. That's the Moshe that we saw in the previous class. We Yedua. The Chochma, we finished up by saying that the inyan from Chochma who bechinas Bittul the Eved, k'moy Moshe Avdi, who b'yesa davke kasher bechinas Ariyah the Chochma bo el halev, who bechinas Oimek halev, shalamayla yesa me Oineg haChochma. We saw that the inyan was davke in Pnimis halev. We spoke about that, what we call that the inyan from Oimek. Pnimis Alei, what does it shy to the Etzem and Neshama more, and therefore the Etzem Pnimius Shebalev, or that reaches into the Tachlis HaKavona, as we'll see in a minute. The Amit is the Pnimis HaKavona of the Riyah de Chochma, and therefore that causes in him a inyan from Shoiv and a inyan from Bittul Kol Matziusai. Me'anit to Mekayim signed the Rotzen of the Melech, but not to be Miskaravelo. That's inyan as we saw it yesterday. So also the Shaila, what you might call the simple Shaila, asked itself, how is it that he gets it Me'amoyach HaLalev? We said the Davke Kasher, it's Nimshach. Me'amoyach B'teich Halev and Nirgash Balev, the Riyah de Chochma. Well, that brings him to the Maila of Kabbalah Soil and to the union of Shiflus and Bittul Rotzen HaMelech and the union of carrying out the Rotzen in Dira B'Tachtonim and Mesias Kelim B'Zeh Ha'olam. Well, also the Shaila, how do you get from the Moyach into the Lev? What's the formula whereby it's Nimshach Mea Moyach Elalev, and he said that that's the Ika difference between the Eved and the Sar in the Moshel, and that's the Ika between the Etzeminian of Riyah de Chochma, how it is in Moyach, or how that Riyah is Nimshach into the Inyan Alev. Kasher it's in the Indian von Moyach, then it causes other Rabba Rotzei, causes Aliyah, and Advekis Milmata Lamaila, what is similar to a Rotzei. But once it comes into Leiv, then it's Ikar Avodas Shoy. So the question, how do you get from the Moyach into the Leiv?
How do you get the Riyas HaChochma in the north?
Well, we'll see about that as we go along. I think that's been pretty clear. We've dealt with the whole union of Chochmah and the union for Riyah in Chochmah. But Ein Hanami, we'll talk about that a little more. What are the conditions to reach Riyah de Chochmah? But the shaila is, how do you get from the Moyach into the Leiv to carry out this formula? So Ein Hanami, we'll see a little bit as we go along, that's dependent in our union of Hachona mitzad de Adam Atzmei in his Avodah, because we're now going to move into the question, how does it become Avodas Atzmei? The whole time we've been talking that the Ikar union of Shoiv is Davki Avodah B'Koach Atzmei. So where do we see here the union of Avodah B'Koach Atzmei? So we'll see that in the Etzem union from Riyah de Chochmah, and Afilu in the Gila of Riyah de Chochmah, Eitzer Adam, that's maybe not the Avodah Atzmei. We say that the Avodas Atzmei is in two Oifanim, and that's one what you might call before the union, and the other is Liachre HaInyan. In other words, in order for that to be Beklal Inyan Shel Riyah de Chochmah, how much more so that the Riyah de Chochmah should be nimshah to the Leiv, there has to be a lot of Yegiyas Atzmei on the part of the Adam to prepare himself and to purify himself and to be misrachik from the Inyan Elam Hazeh and to come to a bittul and a kli b'toich Atzmei, by way of having made himself shayat telakus b'koyach aveda mesuderes of on the one hand being misrachik from dvarim not ritzuyim, and from being misbeinen and miskarev in his avodah to inyoni elikus, through arousing a love of Hashem, a fear of Hashem, ava and yira, and all those inyonim. Precisely through that, it's shy for him to come to the union of Riyah de Chochmah. And we'll say that the more he's done that, then the more it's shy that the Riyah de Chochmah will be nimshach b'toicha alev, because there's kilo a kli kibul in the lev. He's made himself like a vessel and a kli that higher inyonim and higher giluyim can be nimshach b'toich his heart. And then the other union of Avodas Atzmei, we'll see that follows after the Riyah de Chochmah is nimshach b'toich alev. Then there's still the Avodah of Torah u'mitzvahs, ba'asiyas kelim in Olam Hazeh, mamish, bringing out all of the inyanim into Poel mamish, b'toich Avodah b'Torah mitzvahs, and birur zichur ha'olam. But that's once again a union from Avodah b'Koach Atzmei. So we've got like a preparation to the Riyah de Chochmah, and then afterwards we'll have another union which is Avodah b'Koach Atzmei. But the Etzem union of Riyah de Chochmah is Oyer Elyon, which is Meir of the Mensch, as we're going to see in a second. So we could suggest that it depends what type of hachana you made as to whether the Riyah de Chochmah will remain in the union of Moyach, or whether it will actually be nimshach el halev. And that's like the pitch climb of the shayla that we're asking right at this very moment. And that's what we see, that often it's brought down in Siddur, that the union of Tmimas is connected with the union of the heart davke. Yeah, we say the union from Tmimei Leiv, and we call that there's Libi Tomim in Tehillim, Tier Libi Tomim B'chukecha. We see often the union from Pshitas and Tmimas is connected with the union Alev. In other words, why is it that the oimek of the Leiv is such a kli to the oimek of the union from Riyah de Chochmah and even Lamayla Mizeh? Or as mitzad the Tmimas of the Leiv, a certain simplicity and bittul, and not asking shaylas, but going with like we see by the always. We say every day in davening that the Eibishter says it, or we praise Avraham Avinu, the Eibishter found him. You found his heart faithful, trusty in front of you. That in the heart is a certain simplicity and tmimus, readiness to go ahead, and that's what we call here Kabbalah Soil, and that's what connects up with the Inyan from Kabbalah Soil. Aber mir b'shas a mensch's avodah is in a open from simplicity and tmimus, that he goes further and he's not choiche v'doirish all sorts of shilas, but he throws himself into the avodah, and he doesn't weaken himself with all sorts of questions and chakiras al piseichel, and he goes with pshitas and tmimus. But then he's a kli mitzad the leiv davke to be mamshich the av of a year, particularly the chokhmah, the riyah, the chokhmah, to bring that down into the heart. And that's what we see, that there's two different types of tmimus also. There's a tmimus where a mensch is, we say that a mensch is a bit of a tomim. Sometimes you can use the expression, not in the most complimentary sense. I mean, he's a little like simple, he doesn't really know a great deal about what's being said to him, and he just goes ahead without paying attention to much around him, and that can have certain miles to it. But it's not the immediate inyan from tmimus. The emes inyan from tmimus is davkei le'achri, what a mensch has been involved in avodas Hashem, and he's been involved in understanding Elokus and bringing to Av of a Yira, to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and yet nonetheless he puts off all of those, what you might call higher echelons of understanding and a fulfillment, and he puts it all away, and he becomes a tomim. He becomes devoted in a simple and in a whole way. Therefore the word tomim also means whole or wholesome. And that was the Inyan of Tom Chei Tmimim. That was the whole Inyan why the Rebbe called the yeshiva Davki Tom Chei Tmimim. Was the whole idea was that not that they should be simple people that just walked around and were simple and faithful people and didn't ask any shilas, but that they were people that the requirement was to be involved in Avodas Hashem and in his bonanas Elokus and in the Seiras Avaveh, the year, and all the things that were demanded of the Bochim Mitomchet Tmimim, and Leachri Mizeh, to realize that to come to the Oifen Aveda, that the Ikar was a form of pashtus and simplicity, and it's written in Ayin Beis that comes from the Tmimus of the Rotzen Ha'atzmi, the simple Rotzen of the Nefesh Elokis to be Dovuk in Elokus, or that awakens, and we'll see that touches onto this whole Inyan of Riyah, the Chochmah. And therefore, Davke, a person like that, is an emes Baal Kabbalah Soil, because he's able to take on himself a yoke, knowing what he's doing in a what you might call a way that he gives himself away entirely to the yoke. And therefore he's bottled, but Davke, because he had a lot of inyanim prior to that, which lit up his soul both in the inyan of understanding and in the inyan for midas. But nonetheless, he puts all that off, and he devotes himself with a simplicity and a pashtus and a lack of what you might call hesitating because of chakiras, and that's called tmimus. And that was what was demanded of the people, the Hasidim in Lubavitch, that they be tmimim, but they to be davki tmimim li achrei ha'avoda and b'teich ha'avoda. Somebody who holds by that, that's davki a shleimus in the leiv. It's not in the moyach. That's davki a devotion, which after all the inyanim which the moyach can produce, there's a certain devotion of the Adam to himself in an oifen which is mitzad the etzem, and that's what we saw the shurish of that, davki in the leiv davki. The oimek haleiv is davki magia to the oimek hapshitas of the etzem nefesh, and therefore he's in an oifen from Kabbalah's oil, and that's what we suggested. The Rebbe meant that the inyan from Kabbalah Soil is be'ikah b'leiv, but that's the tmimus and the shitas of the leiv. When it's ba'ifim kozeh, then no matter how high we will go in the moyach, he doesn't stay in the moyach. He knows that ultimately the tachlis is to bring it into the leiv davke. And that's what we see, that there's a famous series of Maimonim from the Frierdiker Rebbe in the year Toshin Aleph, where he's mavaya over there barichas, that you have to have, a chosid must have what is called the inyan from tzumas halev, that you must bring your heart to notice what is going on. In other words, everything you achieve in hasoga and understanding and appreciation in chokhmah bina and afilu in das, you've got to have a certain tuning in of the heart. The heart has got to be able to draw itself to appreciate what does all that really mean in a simplicity and aveda b'tei ha'olam. Therefore, we see that at the end of the Torah, right near the end of Devarim, after Moshe Rabbeinu is given the whole Torah, and after he's even said the Shira Sa'azinu, he's given the whole song and the whole shleimus of the Torah, then he says to the Yidden, Yaviato Yisrael, Yesimu levavchem l'chol asher dibati, or l'chol asher diva Hashem, has to be the Yidden from Simu levavchem. So the Frierdiker Rebbe Masber, that there has to be a deliberate act on the part of a Yid, that he's got to take his heart and make his heart literally a kli kibul to everything that he's been masik mitzad the moya and afilu mitzad the inim from the more chitzenius aspect of the lev. He's got to all bring it down, but take pnimis halev, and then that leads to a form of tamimus, and then he becomes completely involved and devoted to Elokus. So we can say that's what the Rebbe means here, that the inyanim of Riyad Chochmah have to be nirgash, believe, and that doesn't work stam, it doesn't just happen with a flip of the fingers, or that comes with the lengthy working on himself, that he prepares himself and makes hachonas rabbis, that he should be, even for tmimas and pashtas, but that opens up the leiv and the clay of the pnimis leiv, that then they're able to be makabel the whole inyan of the moyach. That's like a long inyan of hachona to this inyan of the Olam HaShoiv. Therefore, it's not so much at the etzem shoiv, it's always bekoyach atzmei. But if he hadn't had all that big preparation within himself, and particularly in the tmimus haleiv, then it wouldn't have been just nimshach, even if he'd reached the high understanding of Riyad Chochmah, which is not understanding anymore, it's really mamish, a form of Re'iyah, that wouldn't necessarily be nimshach ela leiv. Therefore we see that a certain elevated people, what is nisha, it remains in the moya, and he's even called a sar, he can even be called an elevated person, but it remains a inyan from oineg ha-moya bilvad. And then we saw that he brought down that the inyan from Riyad Chochmah is mitzad the inyan from bittul of a eved, when it's nimshach into the lev, it causes the bittul of the eved davke, and he quoted the inyan from Moshe Avdi. Well, that's an amazing example of what we just said, because Moshe Rabbeinu was betachlis ha'ilu in all understanding, and in Chochmah there's never been anybody higher. And yet nonetheless several psukim call Moshe Rabbeinu Moshe Avdi, that he had that unbelievable power to bring from the Riyad Chochmah in the highest possible form, to bring that down into the inyan of Avdus, but that's the inyan of Kabbalah Seah mitzad tmimus halei. In other words, that Moshe Rabbeinu was a Yamasa Tomim, had he might call it, he was the tmimus haki nifla, that's after Lataya, that he was able to bring all of those inyanim into the inyan from Eved Davka. And that's what we find that the Alter Rebbe brings in Likutei Torah, in Parsha Bolach, when I get to Shabbos, that it's all that every Yid on Shabbos goes from the inyan from Yankiv into the Madrega of Yisrael. In the weekdays we're in the level of Yankiv, and on the Shabbos Yidden arise to the level of Yisrael. And he brings over there that's two inyanim in Yira. There's Yira Tatoa and Yira Eloah. But Yira Tatoa is simple Yira. That's the K of the Shem Havaya. And Yira Eloah is the Yud of the Shem Havaya. I mean, the K meaning the K Tatoa, the lowest K. So everybody asks the Shali, how did you jump from the lowest point to the highest point? What about in the middle? You got a higher K, and then you got the Vav. What's with them? So the Alter Rebbe is masber over there that in the simplicity of a Eved Poshut is really hidden the highest inyanim in the Yud of the Shem Havaya, not the K and not the Vav, no, in the highest inyan of the Shem Havaya, or that's Yira Eloah, absolute bittul b'matzias mamish, or the simple inyan of a Eved, he's makabel from that level, and he has what jumps over all the other madregas, that he becomes a kli, and on the contrary, when that is nimshach in doing, that makes him even more of a of an Eved. So on Shabbos, a Yid also has to be an Eved, but he's an Eved in the way he's makabel from Pnimis ve'atzmiyas Ein Seif Mamish, but that's the Yira Iloah. And that's the Taich, Eved Neman. That we say in the prayers on Shabbos, we say Yismach Moshe. Yeah, but Matanas Chelch and Shachris and the Shem and Esrei. And then we say Ki Eved Neman Koros Aloi. Why should we be Mesameach in Moshe Rabbeinu's Madrege? Because he's a Eved Neman. So the Alter Rebbe says, what do you mean, a Eved Neman, a faithful servant? That he's a Eved, but he's got the level of Yira Iloah, and the Yidin for the highest possible Yinyonim from Riyah, and all those Yinyonim mitzad Yira Iloah, and they're all nimshach into the Poshet Aveda of a Eved. And he said, a Eved of that nature is called an Eved Neman. He's got tremendously high madregas, and yet nonetheless he decided, and he's made himself into a Eved. As our Eved is called Eved Neman. And then it's written Yishmach Moshe. So the Alter Rebbe says there, that the Emes Inyam from Simcha comes Stavki Mitzad the Bittul of Eved Neman with all Arichas. What's not the place to get involved in it over here, even though Purim Kotan is connected with the Inyam from Simcha. Of Amasuda, the Dike Simcha, not a Simcha from just drinking mashke v'kayetz v'zeh. No, I am a Indian of Simcha Saleh. So therefore he goes on to say now, the Rebbe, he said, however, we shouldn't touch it. B'chinas shoiv zeh shemitzad b'chinas hariyah d'chochma. I'm sorry, the b'chinas shoiv zeh, or this Indian of shoiv, which is mitzad the Indian from riyah of chochma, hu mitzad gilui oyer elyoin shemeya olav. Shalidei zeh nasa b'chinas shoiv. So now we need to understand what does he mean with that sentence. He says that the Indian of the shoiv that comes mitzad riyah the chochma is really mitzad that divine light has shined upon him, and that's brought him to the Indian from shoiv. So why we say that the divine light shined upon him? I mean, he's done a heck of a lot of work if he got to Yira the Riyah the Chochma, and now he's brought down Yira the Chochma. Yeah, B'toich Alev, and that's also a big achievement. And he's now in a state of shoiv. And what does it mean that that's because our Oyer Elyon is Meya Olav? And that's Kilu a formula that we're going to work on, because now he immediately goes on to say, but how did he get to that, etc. Is why would we say that it's Mitzad Oyer Elyon? So that is due to the fact that Chochma, as we said, the Inyan from Chochma, as we pointed out on many occasions, is a Inyan of Bitul Valiyah B'toich Ha'etzem. The Ilu Bina is a Inyan for taking Ha'oras Mi Chochma and bringing them down into Hasoga and into details, how they unify with the Mensch. But the Inyan from Chochma is Be'etzem not the Mensch. And therefore Chochma is called Koyach Ma, or that's the Inyan of Ma Ubitul, despite the fact that it's a Koyach. And therefore, when you reach the Pnimius, the Atzmius of Chochma, it's not really you, but you are observing that which is completely higher than yourself. And you're like looking into a tremendous vision of vista of something which is not you. On the contrary, that's Atzma ain't say. And therefore, what is Meir on you in Chochma is really the Emes Eikshu Mitzad Elikus, not what you take Elikus. Now, how you are elevated in such a way that Elikus takes you. And that's the difference between Chochma and Bina in Chassidus. Chochma is how you're taken by Elikus. And Bina is how you take what Elikus can give you. Or in Chochma, you're bottled completely to Elikus. And that's the Inyan of Koyach Ma. You still remain in the spirit, but you become completely Ois. And that's what he writes in Tanya in Perek Lamed Hey. In the Hagor, the Alter Rebbe said the Chochma is the Inyan from Echad HaEmes. And he says, Hu levade ve'ein zulase zuhi madreges HaChochma. He schreibt the Alter Rebbe dort. The Hu levade ve'ein zulase. There's nothing else apart from the Eivah. No Matthias, Klau. That's the madrega of Chochma. A madrega means a madrega. It means that there's only something there. Hu levade ve'ein zulase means that there's nothing there. So that's the Indian. The Chokhmah is how you are there, but you're not there. You're not there because the emes, that's what he said, Echad Ho'emes, that the emes is mayor upon you. And you are given the unbelievable privilege that you can observe it. Well, that's a Riyah de Chokhmah. It's almost like you look in to this amazing vista that's really not you. And therefore, what happens in Pnimis HaChokhmah is that Emes Havaya Li'elam Hu Levade Ve'ein Zulatzei, he takes you. Or not that you take him. Bina is another chesed what David's to make. Bina is that you remain in your Matthias and none of us you take it. That's another type of chesed. So that was the Rebbe. The Yidin from Riyah de Chokhmah is really a Yidin from Oyer Elyon, which you've been given the principle of observing, the privilege. You've been given the privilege of observing it. And therefore, whatever happens to you, mitzad that Oyer, is really the Oyer is affecting you, because you're not really there. As we said, Koach Ma means you're not there. Atalo Sham. If you're not really there, then the shoiv which comes mitzad that is literally something has been so massive and so tremendous that it's pushed you, as it were, into a state of bittul, and you're so botel that you say, "Oi, Gewalt, yeah, I can only do what he wants me to do. Yeah, I can only carry out his rotzen lamata." Like we saw in the form of an Eved, that the Inyan from the Pnimis HaChokhmah, how it is in Yirei Lo, reaches down into the Inyan from Eved. But, says the Rebbe, Achidish Tova, he said, that's really not your doing. He comes to us that the Etzem Shoiv, what you do, mitzad the Riyah de Chokhmah, is not really your Avodah. No, that's mitzad the Gilei Oyer Elyon. Ach, zehu gam kein, rak masha ha'oyer Elyon poil liyeh b'pchinas Shoiv. He said that's only what the Elyon is poil to be the shoy. It actually makes you go down. But once you get down and you say, "Oh, now I'm down in this world, and I'm bottled like an Eved, and I got to do. What am I supposed to do now? What am I doing down here?" So the answer is Torah mitzvah, and the Torah mitzvahs are going to be perfect, and they're going to be soaked with all this Inyan of this tremendous vision of Elokus that you've had. So therefore he said, once you're down there, and the Elyon has been poil on you, that Inyan from Shoiv, then etz aval, etzim kiyum ha-Torah mitzvah, nasa le'dizeh lamata, ha'le'zeh mikor it comes to us after the Shoiv, or after the movement of Shoiv, within the Nefesh or Odom, then he's got to get cracking, and then he has to do himself. In other words, nobody's going to do that for you, not even Kaviyachol. The Eibishter, or the Inyan of breaking yourself into Torah mitzvahs, Kabbalah Seir, and to affect the world with Torah mitzvahs, that you got to do yourself. It comes to you, B'koyach ha'oira, Achimisha me'yolo. Shezeu ha'goyrem b'pchinas ha'bitl shaloi, liyois lamata davki. V'lashish kelim le, if it weren't for the fact that tremendous oil had shined on you, and that unbelievable oil appeared on you, and that caused you to go down, then ain't no haram, you wouldn't have the courage to be there, and you wouldn't have the courage to carry out the Inyan. Siyas Keilim Lalakus, but Torah Umitzvah. So come to us that that's responsible for your being there, but that doesn't do the work for you. Yeah, the work is only done by you yourself. That's what we see. We have to understand now the Mesiras Nefesh of a Yid of this nature. That here he's been in an infant Rotzah, and he's seen Elokus mitzad the bittul of Chokhmah and Riyah de Chokhmah, and he's got this tremendous gishmak in Elokus, and all of a sudden that itself says to him, "Oh no." You've got to, and like we said before, what's the crash? How do we know that he's going to get it down into his lave, Dafki, and going to become an Eved mitzad the lave? But that's a tremendous, having prepared himself. We'll see a little bit about that in a second. But nonetheless, it's a big Mesiras Nefesh and Kabbalah Seir on the part of a mensch, not just to be high and in Ruchnias, but to know that his Inyan is to be an Eved, and Dafki to be Lamata, and Dafki to be busy with the world, and to be told in all the Inyanim of Gilei Elokus in the world, Mamish, And he said that the Indian from last is Kalim, Lelakuz. He said the Ria de Chochma in a form of Elyon is only a Gorem Leze. If you hadn't had that unbelievable privilege of having observed Elakuz in that way, you wouldn't come to that show. But once you come to it, then it's only a Gorem, it's only what's brought you there. But the Etzem Arvet, as they say, the Arvet, the work that you have to do yourself. And what is it? Making Kalim Lelakus. Aval Etzem or Asiya. He said the actual doing of those Kalim, being Lamata, B'teich Ha'olam, Vadai Hi B'koyach Atzmei. No doubt about it, says that you have to do yourself. Vadai means for sure. Everybody knows, put down in Sifrei HaKabbalah and also in Chassidus, that the word Vadai is a Rosh Tevis, Vayivorek David Es Hashem. It's also Vatan Chassidus, Vayivorek David Es Hashem, means that Livorek means to bring down. Lamshik Lamata, that he brought down all of the Inyane Alakus Lamata Mata. Anyway, Vadai hu b'koyach atzmei, l'kamoishen is bu l'yiyo, the etzem b'chinas ha-shoiv b'kiyum ha-teiro mitzvahs, hu b'koyach atzmei d'avkel. We said that the etzem inyan of the shoiv. In other words, that the shoiv is got two things to it. The shoiv is the returning and realizing what you've got to do, and then there's the doing it b'poel. So the realizing what you've got to do and that you've got to be in a state of shoiv, that's mumayla. That's mitzad the Riyah de Chochma. That's mitzad the Elyon. But once you realize that, then you got to actually get cracking and actually do it. Or that is mitzad the koyach of the mensch himself. That's the koyach hatzmai. So we see there's like two tremendous stages. Omnom, says the Rebbe, mishum zeh, due to that, yefshar lachshoi v'shashoi b'koyach hatzmai. He said, mitzad what we just explained, it's impossible to consider that the shoiv would be called b'koyach atzmei. Shaharei hakavona pnimis shebamitzvahs hu b'derech mamela al yedei gilui elyon. V'chein asiya, he b'koychoi v'yasi osei. But he said, apnimius b'zeh hu al yedei oyer ho'eliki shemeya etzloi b'riyah de chochma. So the Rebbe said, to put it more technically, what it means is that there are two things now in the shoiv. There's the etzem asiyah, and the doing it a Torah mitzvahs b'derech kabbalah soil in the world to make the world kelim lelakus. And then he said there's the prompting to that and the inspiration to that which came with tzaddinim from Riyah de Chochma. And the union would that caused you to come down. But what's the connect line? Once again, what connects them, or what is the link? So all of a sudden I realize I got to be lamata. That's how I'm lamata. But how do I preserve that, and how do I go ahead? On what basis? Do I all of a sudden say, well, here I am now lamata? What's the union po? Ma yesh lasotka. So that's what we explained earlier in the Maimah, that the Maila of Shoiv is that Shoiv is mitzad the Kavana Pnimius of the Eibishter. The Emes of Kavana, what Hashem had in making the world, was Tapki, the union from Diraloy is Barabatach to Inim, and that everything should be Nimshit Lamata, and the Tafki here, but Teich Zeho Elam, we should make the world Kelim to Elakus, as we mentioned earlier in the Maimah, the whole union from the Kavana Pnimi, yes, and that's what brings about the Shoiv. So he said, when you switch from the Riyah de Chochma, from Rotzei into the Inyan from Shoiv, in the Riyah de Chochma itself, but that's through the Tmimus Alev, like we said before. That also asks yourself the Shaila, how does that work? Having been through that at the beginning of the Shia, now we get to the fact that you come down into the world. What inspires you, what holds you, is that Riyah de Chochma keeps telling you that the Kavana Pnimius is what you're doing. Amamir, that gives you a tremendous ability to keep going and to be moisef all the time in the Avodah, because there's like a tremendous Kavana Pnimis, is Meya inside that Asiyah, that you know you're doing what is the etzem purpose of Hashem in the whole creation, and you know that you're here to make kelim, and you're ultimately to make a dir Eloi is bara batach to in him, and the Melech Hamashiach was Moishev, that now its Indian is to bring kelim ad kedikach to his scholars of Malchus Melech Hamashiach and Atzma saying say mamish bepel mamish betoicha ha'olam. That's not ha'inem. Oid kavana shir. Oid tosefes. The Indian a kavana. That's what the Rebbe says now, that the Indian from the kavana pnimiyas. He said, that's b'derech mamela. You got that not from your own work. You got that because you saw Elikus, and Elikus spoke to you and it told you what's really going on. What is the ultimate kavana? And that's the union of the pnimis v'atzmis ha-kavana. That's the b'derech mamela. Yeah. However, he said the union from the asiya. That's b'koach hatzmi. In other words, the two inyonim add up with what we said just a minute ago. And therefore he said, pnimius bazeh. What is the inner neshama that's koching away inside your doing and inside your asiya? Hu alidei ha'er alaki shemeir etzloi bariya de chachma ve'ika hashoiv hu ha'kavana pnimius. And we said before, that's the kavana pnimius of the Eibishter, that he wants davke b'dirabah Tartayim Adavki to be Toicha Oilam and to be Mamshich Atzmus Ein Seif Lamata B'Toicha Oilam. That gives a match a tremendous boosting power, even though he's gone against the whole nature of the Ratzoi, and he's come down into a Inyan for Shoyiv, and now he's Lamata, and he's had a couple of Seilnik, and he's a Eved. And so to a certain extent you might say, well, I sort of lost all the glamour, I'm an Eved Pashut down here. What is the motivations, you might call it? What is the oir and the koch pnimi inside all of that, which gives him the boost that takes it always further, and Adarabah adds to it the whole time. Well, that's the kavana pnimi. Now that he knows, and he's actually almost seen, as you might say, he's seen the kavana pnimi is, and the kavana pnimi is always talking to him, and then that pushes him further, and that motivates him and gives him the ability to carry everything out. Kumtais, that we got here several inyanim. We have that, first of all, he prepared himself in such a way that he was able to get into Riyah de Chachma. Then he had already prepared himself in such a way, and he works on himself in such a way that Riyah will come down into the lave. And once that happens, then he goes down in a form of shoiv, and he leaves behind all these big glamorous inyonim that he had, and that's not stam glamour, very, very high inyonim in Elikus. And then the Elyon Shabazeh, that's Meir in him, and gives him the koyach to be in the world and carry out the kavana pnimis, and that's like the pnimis, or the neshama of his avodah, and that's what keeps him going, even though he's a eved, and he's become a eved. And that's what we would call, like we saw before, in the name of the Alter Rebbe, in the Likutei Torah, that's an eved ne'eman. Therefore he's called a trustworthy servant, because we can rely on him. We know he's always going to turn the right way, and as you might say, he's going to make the right decisions of Keyetzebet. Omnam, said the Rebbe, Gam klolos ha'inyan liyesh gilui elyon kemoi bechinas riyah de chokma hanal liyesh alidei zeh hashoiv kanal b'dei lavoi lo zeh Harizeh alidei yagia v'aveda b'izdachachus nafshoy ba'sogu v'izbonenes v'avave. Yeah, like we said before, we made the point that how does he get to this whole different at the beginning? How does he get to Bechlal, to his level from Riyah de Chachma? He got up to such a point that so we pointed out that that's also through a way to B'koach Hatzmi. In other words, there's a way to B'koach Hatzmi before, then there's a way to B'koach Hatzmi at the end. In the middle, the Eibishter, as it were, takes him and gives us this unbelievable Gilui Nu'mayla, which shows him where to take everything in the right direction. But he said you would never have been able to get anywhere near Riyah de Chachma if you hadn't made a tremendous effort. And we saw that Yigia Vaveda B'izdachakus Nafshay, the purification of his nefesh, Basoga V'izbonenes V'yavava with the union of understanding and being misbeinen in what you understood and having love and fear of the Eibishter. Ki tzrichim lischleis lebechinas riyah de chok. You don't get riyah de chokmas down. You have to have a worthiness and a schus. You have to be zeicher lebechinas riyah de chokma. V'hainu alidei aveda v'yagiyah tchila. Right from the very beginning, basoga v'izbonenes v'izdachakas nafshoi b'ava v'yira. Oz harihu zeicher lebechinas riyah de chokma. Sure. And I remember it's Hadikot, like they say, avoid at the beginning and avoid at the end, and in the middle, a big and tremendous siyata dishmaya of only ali day schus, only that you had a schus to that, and that was through the preparation that you made, and particularly as we said in the avodah for tmimus, but that's also a preparation for the gilui dav kibbeh believe. Alright, so that'll be enough for this evening.
How do you do everything with Tmimus when you study how complicated and how it gets? And
that's what we pointed out. That's you have to learn in Talmud Tmimus. That's what the Rav Rashab said. The Rav Rashab said you have to be a Tomim after you know it. And that's a much higher form of Tomim. And that's a Tmimus which comes inside the Etzem HaNefesh. There can be a Teva, there can be a Tmimus which is called Teva HaOdom. That's the way he's a Tomim, a push to men. It doesn't involve in too many inyanim. He just does things simply. That's not what Tomim Tomim is about. Tomim Tomim brings you to all the details and yet tells you that you've got to become nonetheless a Tomim. And that means by putting yourself into the inyan of Tmimus through Aveda Davka. And that's what we described before.
Rabbi, but the Chassidus always talks about, Hisbonenus and this and that, and it doesn't really tell you what to meditate on other than,
yes, it
God
does.
is big.
Oh yes, it does. You shouldn't say that. Chassidus tells you a lot about Hisbonenus. Maybe not in this particular text. Well, there's a lot about Hisbonenus in Chassidus. And we can talk about that in private. I can tell you where you want to look up about Hisbonenus a lot. So maybe if you want, we can talk about the Indian Hisbonenus a bit in the cloud. What does it mean Hisbonenus and so on. But there's a big cloud, and I once heard from one of the great mashpiyim, that he said if people ask too many shilas about what is Hisbonenus, how is Hisbonenus, what do you do, how do you do it, what is it, that's a sign that they're not really looking to do anything. They're just trying to make out that you can't really know what it is, so there's nothing what to do. But once you start off trying to think about things and try to reflect on things, try to take them into your mind, then you can be guided a bit about the details of what some more specific details in Hisbonenus. Of Hisbonenus, you've got to take seriously, think about it, and try to put it into your mind and think about it even when you're not learning it, and that already leads you into Hisbonenus. But in the we'll talk about it a bit more.